My name is Jennifer Walsh, and I have been working as a park ranger in Rocky Mountain National Park for over 17 years. However, after what happened last month, after the government finally admitted what it had been hiding since 1973, I can finally share this story with you without fear of legal consequences. To be honest, I never really feared legal consequences. Before I get into the subject, I want you to understand one thing very clearly. If you're watching this while planning a trip to Rocky Mountain National Park, there is something you need to know. You know those trail maps they give you at the visitor center? They are incomplete, and this is definitely not a coincidence. It's something they do deliberately and knowingly. There are places in that park that don't officially exist, trails that have been removed from the records, and areas that rangers are instructed never to enter or acknowledge. If you ever felt like you were being watched while hiking in RMNP or noticed your GPS malfunctioning in certain areas, hit the subscribe button and don't forget to turn on notifications, because you'll want to listen to all 3 parts of this story. And please, if you find a trail that isn't on your map, hit the like button. Trust me, you're not crazy. You've just stumbled upon information the Park Service has been hiding for over 50 years. Rocky Mountain National Park covers 415 square miles of the Colorado Rockies and ranges in elevation from 7,500 to 14,000 feet. According to the official story, there are 355 miles of hiking trails in the park, all carefully mapped and extremely well maintained. But I can tell you for a fact that there are at least 40 more miles of trails that have been deliberately omitted from public records. I know because I've walked those trails, and I know exactly where they lead. I grew up in Estes Park, the gateway to RMNP. My father was a park ranger before me, and my grandfather was one of the first trail builders when the park was established in 1915. The mountains were in my blood. I knew every backcountry campsite, every official trail, every hidden waterfall that tourists rarely found. At least, I thought I did. On September 8, 2019, everything changed. It started as a routine search and rescue operation. David and Emma Davis, a married couple from Denver, had gone missing during what was supposed to be a simple day hike to Sky Pond. They were experienced, well-equipped, and had the necessary backcountry permits. When evening came and they didn't return, their daughter reported them missing. I was the head ranger on duty, so I first assembled a small search team. Myself, the eager but more novice ranger Tyler Morrison, and Bill Crawford, a volunteer SAR member who had been running these mountains for 30 years and knew every inch of them like the back of his hand. At first light, we set out from the Glacier Gorge trailhead and followed the standard route to Sky Pond. The trail to Sky Pond is one of the park's most famous trails, 9 miles long, with an elevation gain of approximately 2,000 feet. It passes Alberta Falls, traverses the dramatic Loch Vale, and ends at the breathtaking Sky Pond at an elevation of 10,900 feet. Thousands of people hike this trail every year, and people don't normally just disappear. But the Davis family was missing. At first we found their tracks easily. They were wearing modern hiking boots that matched the bodies reported. They passed Alberta Falls, went through Loch Vale, and we followed them up to the final climb to Sky Pond. Then, something very strange happened. Their tracks veered off the trail about 100 meters before the lake, heading into a dense Krumholtz forest of twisted, stunted trees growing at high altitude. "This is strange," said Tyler, checking his GPS. "Why did they veer off the trail here?" "There's nothing over there." Bill was examining the tracks more closely. "Look at these tracks, in a perfect single file, one right behind the other. Experienced hikers don't do that. It's inefficient and dangerous." He was right. It was as if they were following something or someone who knew exactly where they were going. Continuing to follow the tracks, I entered the Krumholtz, passing through the dense, twisted branches. About 50 meters later, I came across something that shouldn't have been there. An incredibly well-maintained trail, about a meter wide, with marker stones every 20 meters. "What's going on here?" Tyler whispered behind me. "This isn't on any map." I pulled out my phone and opened the official Park Service's map app. Our GPS location showed we were in the middle of untracked wilderness. According to all records, this trail simply didn't exist. "Bill," I called out, "have you seen this before?" Bill emerged from the Krumholtz, glanced at the trail, and his face paled. "We have to go," he said immediately. "Right now." "What? We can't. The Davis are gone." Bill cut me off, fear in his voice. "If they took that trail, they're gone. And if we follow them, we'll be gone too." "Bill, what are you talking about?" He looked around nervously, then pulled me aside and spoke in a low, urgent voice. My dad was a park ranger here in the 70s. He told me stories about trails that shouldn't exist, about places in the park that even park rangers aren't allowed to go, especially the forest rangers. He said that if I ever found a place like that, I should turn back and never tell anyone about it. "That's nonsense," Tyler objected. "We have a job to do. There are people missing." I stood at the edge of that impossible trail, torn between my duty and the genuine fear in Bill's eyes. Davis's tracks were clearly visible on the trail. As a forest ranger, I had sworn to protect and rescue park visitors. But something about this trail triggered my instincts. It was too perfect, too well-maintained for a place that shouldn't be an official trail. "I'm going," I decided. "You two can wait here if you want, but I'm going to find the Davis." Tyler immediately stepped forward. "I'm coming with you." Bill grabbed my arm. "Jennifer, please." "You don't understand what you're getting into. There are things in this park, things that have been hidden for decades, reasons why certain areas are off-limits." "Then tell me," I demanded. "What's at the end of this path?" Bill looked at the path first, then turned to me. "I don't know, but my father said that in 1973, 12 park rangers went to investigate a report of an unmarked path near Sky Pond. Only one came back, and he wasn't the same. The Park Service covered it up, saying they died in an avalanche, but there was no avalanche. The only survivor, before being committed to a mental hospital, kept talking about things that shouldn't be above the tree line, about a facility." "A facility?" Tyler laughed nervously. "What, like a secret base? Come on." But I wasn't laughing, because I remembered something my father had told me before he died. He had worked here in the 80s, and once, drunk and melancholic, he had mentioned something about areas in the park managed by people who weren't part of the Park Service. Federal lands belonging to officially non-existent agencies. I had thought he was paranoid, maybe even an early dementia patient. Now I wasn't so sure. "We're going in," I decided, "but we'll be careful. We'll stick together, mark our path, and run at the first sign of real danger." "Deal?" Tyler nodded eagerly. Bill reluctantly agreed to come, but first pulled a bright orange spray paint can from his backpack and marked a large X on a tree at the trailhead. "So we can find our way back," he said. But I sensed it was more than that. Maybe it was a warning for those who stumbled here by accident. We followed the trail through Krumholtz and came out on a ridge I'd never seen before. This was impossible. I knew every ridge, every viewpoint in this part of the park. But here was a trail following a ridgeline that didn't exist on my GPS. We were walking somewhere 1,000 feet above Loch Vale, where the device claimed there was nothing but empty air. The trail was flawless. There was no erosion, no damage from weather conditions, no traces of the harsh mountain conditions that destroy most trails within a few seasons. The marker stones were made of a material I didn't recognize, dark, almost black, with veins that reflected light like metal, and every 100 feet or so there were small markers with only numbers on them: 7-1, 7-2, 7-3. Trail markers? Tyler asked. Maybe, I said, but they looked more like zone markers, something dividing the trail into sections for a purpose I couldn't fathom. After walking for about 30 minutes, we found the first piece of equipment. It was David Davis's backpack, standing upright in the middle of the road. It hadn't been dropped or knocked over. It had been placed there. I approached carefully and checked inside. Everything was there: water, food, a phone with a dead battery, and even his wallet. But there was something else that made my blood run cold. There was a note written in David's handwriting, on very old, yellowed and fragile paper, written in pencil. They invited us to see the truth. 1973 was only the beginning. The mountain has been watching us longer than the park has existed. Follow the path and go to the 7th station. Understand what the Rocky Mountains truly protect. The 7th station? Tyler read over my shoulder. What is the 7th station? Bill had become very quiet. When I looked at him, he was staring at something off the trail. Following his gaze, I saw it, partially hidden by a rock outcrop, almost invisible unless viewed from the right angle. It was a structure built into the mountainside, made of concrete and metal, windowless, with a single door bearing warnings in many unfamiliar languages and symbols. "That's impossible," I whispered. "There's no structure here. I searched the entire area." "You searched the officially recognized area," Bill corrected quietly. This is something else." As we approached the structure, our equipment began to act strangely. My radio emitted only static, but rhythmic static, almost like a heartbeat. Tyler's GPS device shut down completely. Even our compasses were spinning wildly, unable to find north. The structure's door was made of heavy steel, but it was open. It hadn't been forced open or broken. It stood open as if inviting us inside. Above the door, barely legible from decades of wear, were the words, "RMNP Special Administrative Zone, Station 7, established 1973. The year Bill's father had mentioned. The year 12 Rangers had investigated an unmarked trail on the map, and only one had returned. I should have turned back. Every instinct, every training, every shred of common sense told me to mark this spot, return to base, and report through proper channels. But the Davis family was there, I was sure of it. Besides, after nearly 50 years in my park, in my mountains, I needed to know what was hidden. "We're going in," I said, pulling out my flashlight. "But we'll stay together, and we'll be out in 15 minutes, whether we find them or not." Tyler nodded, but his hands were shaking as he pulled out his own flashlight. Bill just stared at the entrance, a mask of resignation on his face. "My father was right," he said quietly. "Some trails should not be followed. Some doors should not be opened. But we opened the door anyway. We entered a place carefully hidden from the world we knew, from the public, from most park rangers, from everyone except those with the authority to know that Rocky Mountain National Park protected something far more important than its wilderness." The light from my flashlight pierced the darkness beyond the door and revealed a corridor descending steeply into the mountain. The walls were made of smooth concrete, too smooth for a structure supposedly built in 1973. Lights were placed at regular intervals, but they were dark, abandoned. There was a strange smell in the air, not moldy or stale, but sterile, like a hospital that had been closed for decades. There was a corridor that descended hundreds of meters, but the darkness and the strange acoustics of the space distorted my sense of distance. Our footsteps echoed strangely, sometimes seeming to come from right in front of us, sometimes from behind. On the concrete walls, there were more area markers at intervals. 7A1, 7A2, descending deeper into some strange classification system I couldn't understand. After a 5-minute descent, we reached a junction. The main corridor continued downward, but there was a side passage marked Observation Level 1. As we approached, the emergency lighting immediately kicked in, dim red lights that made everything look covered in blood. The technology was motion sensitive, but decades old, shaky and unreliable. "The Davises came this way," said Tyler, pointing to dusty footprints on the floor. 2 pairs matching the boot prints we had been following. But there were other tracks too, lots of them, different sizes, different prints, some looking very old, some more recent. How many people had found this place over the years? How many had walked these corridors and never returned to tell the tale? Following the tracks, we came to a door marked Archives. The door was ajar, and a sound came from beyond it, a low hum, like machines running on backup power. I pushed the door open and found myself in a room that contradicted everything I thought I knew about my park. The archives were huge, filled with rows of filing cabinets, document storage areas, and what looked like old computer terminals from the 1970s. But one wall looked modern, covered with monitors, most of them dark, but a few still working and showing grainy black and white images of something. The images were very distorted, impossible to make out clearly, but they looked like security camera footage from various locations around the park. Tyler had already moved in front of one of the file cabinets and started pulling out folders. "God, Jennifer, look at this." He handed me a file labeled Incident Report, November 1973, Classification Level 7. Inside were photos, reports, and testimonies that were enough to make my hands shake. The photos showed park rangers I didn't recognize lined up in front of the building when it was new. But behind them, with perfect clarity, was something that shouldn't have been there. A massive, geometric, artificial structure built on the peak I knew as Ida Mountain, clearly not of natural origin. The report detailed an incident on November 15, 1973. A 12-person ranger team had been sent to investigate abnormal activity reported by hikers near Sky Pond. What they found was this trail, this station, and something else. The report grew increasingly bizarre and difficult to follow, mentioning dimensional inconsistencies, temporal variations, and extraterrestrial entities. The last entry belonged to Thomas Bryant, the only ranger who survived. They didn't leave. They're still here, they just moved. The mountain isn't the mountain we thought it was. This is a sign, and a marker left by them. Station 7 was built to monitor and understand this. But we don't understand. This is far beyond our capacity, and the others didn't die. They were taken, absorbed, transformed into something else. Sometimes I still hear sounds coming from the mountain. The Park Service knows this very well. The government knows it too. This part of the park is a quarantine zone for something that has been here long before humans and is still waiting here. "This is crazy," said Tyler. "This can't be real." But Bill was pulling out other files from another cabinet. "It is real," he said firmly, "and not just here. Look." He opened a map showing the entire park, but this map was unlike any map I had ever seen. The official paths were marked in green, but dozens of other paths were drawn over them in red, all leading to stations like this one. Stations numbered 1 through 12 scattered throughout the park, each built to monitor, control, or examine something the public would never know about. "The Davis family," I said, trying to focus on why we were here. "We have to find them." As if responding, one of the working monitors flickered to life. It showed a room somewhere in the facility, and David and Emma Davis were there. They were alive, sitting at a table, and apparently talking to someone off camera. But there was something wrong with the image. The Davises seemed to be flickering, as if they were both there and not there at the same time, existing in multiple states. "Lower level 3, interview room 2, Bill said, reading the label beneath the monitor. "They're 3 floors down." Then we should have left. We should have marked the location, returned to base, and left this matter to someone in authority. But I couldn't leave the Davis, and moreover I needed to understand what had been hidden in my park all these years. The descent to lower level 3 was worse than the first corridor. The walls had turned into something other than concrete. They looked organic but felt like metal. The area markers became more complex. 7C3 Alpha Prime. The air thickened, and even though we were deep underground, my head started spinning as if we were at high altitude. We found interview room 2 easily. The door was open and we could hear voices. The Davis family was talking to someone. But as we got closer, I realized they weren't speaking English. They weren't speaking any language I recognized. It sounded like music or math or a combination of both, something painful to listen to. I peered through the doorframe and saw them. David and Emma Davis were there, but something was off. They were sitting very still, moving very softly when they did move, and their eyes reflected light like cats. Opposite them sat a figure wearing a Park Services uniform from the 1970s, with old-style badges and patches. But the uniform was spotless, as if it had been put on that morning, and the park ranger wearing it. The park ranger wearing it was Thomas Bryant. Thomas Bryant, who was said to be the sole survivor in 1973. But he hadn't aged at all. He was exactly the same as in the photo in the incident report, including the nervous tic in his left eye and the way he tapped his fingers on the table. "Ah," said Bryant, without turning, but somehow knowing we were there. "More visitors. The mountain told me you were coming. It's been telling me things for 46 years. Do you want to know what it said about you, Ranger Walsh?" I stepped into the room, my hand on my gun, but I knew it wouldn't do any good here. "Thomas Bryant. How are you? Dead? In a mental hospital? Retired?" He laughed like the sound of breaking glass. "In some timelines, all of that is true. But here, at the 7th station, time works differently. The mountain sets its own rules. The Davis family is learning that now, isn't it?" David Davis turned to look at me, and his movement was completely off, like a video played at the wrong frame rate. "We understand now," he said in that musical mathematical language, but somehow I understood him. Park isn't protecting the wilderness. He's protecting a gateway. The peaks aren't mountains. They're markers left by those who came before. Beacons, the ones who came before? Tyler asked, his voice trembling. Bryant stood up, and as he did, the room seemed to shift around him, the walls becoming transparent and revealing the true form of Rocky Mountain National Park to us. It was not a place of preserved natural beauty, but a carefully managed control zone around 12 points Bryant called dimensional pinpoints, places where our reality touched others, places where objects could pass if not properly monitored and controlled. When the park was established in 1915, Bryant explained, his voice taking on the tone of a professor lecturing. The goal wasn't to protect the landscape. It was to control access to these areas. The indigenous people knew these areas, avoided them, and told stories about star people and mountain spirits. But when American expansion reached Colorado, and miners and settlers began entering these areas and disappearing, the government had to take action. He showed us images flickering on the walls, as if reflected from another dimension, the construction of the stations in the 1970s, the teams of scientists and military personnel working here, the things they found and tried to control. Creatures existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously, technology that existed millions of years before human civilization. Messages from intelligences that were not quite alive, but not quite dead either. Each station monitored one of 12 points, Bryant continued. We were Station 7 and responsible for the Sky Pond anomaly. Our mission was to redirect approaching walkers and maintain the illusion that this was just wild nature. But in 1973, something changed. The anomaly became active. It began calling to people, drawing them to itself. My team, my friends, answered that call. What happened to them, I asked, but I was afraid of the answer. They evolved, Emma Davis replied, her voice in harmony with her own. They became what humanity will eventually become. The mountain showed them the truth. Consciousness is not limited to the body. Reality is just one frequency among infinite possibilities. They are still here, existing in the gaps between seconds, waiting for the rest of humanity to catch up with them. We volunteered, David added. When we saw the signs, we knew it was for us. The mountain had been calling us through our dreams for years, showing us visions of what was possible. We came here to transcend. Bill had been silent throughout this conversation, but now he spoke. My father was one of the 12 in 1973. Are you saying he's still here? He's still alive? Bryant smiled that terrible, all-knowing smile. William Crawford Sr. is more alive than he ever was in his limited human form. Would you like to see him? Before Bill could respond, the wall behind Bryant became transparent, and we saw inside the mountain. Not the physical mountain's rocks and stones, but the real mountain, a structure existing on a scale our brains could barely process. And there, moving in spaces that shouldn't exist, were figures that could once have been human. They flowed like liquid light, communicating in colors we couldn't name, existing simultaneously in the past, present, and future. One of them noticed us watching and approached our dimension. As it drew nearer, it took on a more recognizable form, and Bill held his breath. It was his father, but transformed, elevated, changed into something beyond human description. "Hello, son," it said, the words appearing in our minds rather than our ears. "I was waiting for you to find this place. You are ready now, ready to understand, ready to evolve." "No," stammered Bill, backing away. "No, this can't be real. This can't be real." But it was real. And as we stood there in that impossible room in that impossible station, I felt the mountain's attention turn to us. The mountain was vast, ancient, and patient. It had been waiting here long before the Rocky Mountains were formed, and it would remain here until the Rocky Mountains were gone. The peaks we saw were its physical manifestation in our limited three-dimensional perception. The real mountain existed in 11 dimensions, perhaps more. "You have a choice," Bryant said, now addressing all of us. "You can leave, return to your lives, act as if you never saw this. The Park Service will ensure your silence. They have methods for that. Or you can stay, learn the truth, become the person you were always meant to be. The transformation is not painful, it is beautiful. You transcend being human. You perceive reality as it is, not the narrow slice your biological senses show you." The Davis family stood up, moving with that terrifying fluid grace. "We're staying," they said in unison. "We're going deep into the mountain. There's so much to learn, so much to happen." Tyler was backing away toward the door. "We have to go. Now, this is too much." But I froze, because now I could feel it, the mountain's call. I realized it had been calling to me my whole life. Every path I'd walked, every peak I'd climbed, had been preparation for this moment. My father had felt it. My grandfather had felt it. We were a family who could hear the mountain's true voice. Jennifer, Bill took my arm. We have to go. Now, before it's too late. He was right. I could feel myself changing, beginning to see things that weren't there. Or were they more real than everything else? The room was becoming transparent, revealing layers of reality stacked upon each other like the pages of a book. I could see the past in which this place had been built. I could see the future where humanity would either evolve or be left behind. I could see today in its infinite variations. "Run," I managed to say, but my voice came out in harmonics I didn't know it was capable of. We ran. First Tyler, then Bill dragged me along, my perception shifting between normal human vision and something else, something that showed me the true structure of Station 7. It wasn't just built inside the mountain, it ran parallel to the mountain, occupying the same space but in different dimensional frequencies. The corridors we ran through existed in multiple versions simultaneously, and I could see them all clearly. The uncorrupted version of 1973, the decayed version of 2019, and perhaps future versions that would never come to pass. I heard Bryant laughing behind us, or perhaps the mountain was laughing at our primal need to escape evolution. The Davis did not follow us. They had made their choice, and thanks to my heightened perception, I could see they had begun their transformation, their bodies becoming less solid, shifting from reality into possibility. The ascent felt like it lasted forever, yet also like it lasted no time at all. Time was shattering around us, or perhaps we were shattering around time. Tyler aged 5 years, then reverted to normal, then briefly became transparent. Bill shifted between his own versions, child, young man, old man, then back to his current age. I felt myself stretching out over decades, experiencing every moment I had lived at once. Then we stepped out of the station into the blinding daylight, and everything returned to normal. We walked along the unmarked path, the door of Station 7 behind us, closed for good, at least for us, shut tight. "Walk," Bill urged us, pulling us forward, out of breath. "The path, it's not always permanent. Sometimes it disappears, trapping people in places that don't exist." We ran along the impossible path, the marker stones now glowing faintly with a metallic sheen, as if activated by our presence. As we passed, the numbers changed. 73, 72, 7-1, counting down to something. When we reached the 0 marker, the path began to fade. Below the trail, I could see the real mountain slope, the true geography of Rocky Mountain National Park re-emerging. As the trail vanished, we plunged into the Krumholtz and returned to the normal world with a sensation like breaking through ice. Tyler immediately vomited, his body rejecting the experience of existing across multiple dimensions. Bill suddenly aged 10 years, his hair graying at the temples. And I could still see things that weren't quite there, the shadows of other timelines, the clues to the true structure underlying reality. The return to the beginning of the walkway was silent. What could be said? We had seen something inexplicable, unreportable, something that minds evolved to cope with simple, three-dimensional reality couldn't process. The Davises' car was still in the parking lot, but I knew they wouldn't come back for it. They were now part of the mountain, or the mountain was part of them, or both, or neither. At the Forest Ranger Station, I filled out a report stating that the Davis had likely fallen off an unmarked cliff and their bodies would never be found. This was a lie containing a truth. They had fallen, not just in space, but between dimensions, and their bodies could not truly be found in any form we as humans could recognize. Tyler resigned the next day, made no explanation, just packed his things and left Colorado entirely. The last I heard, he was working as an accountant in Florida, as far away from the mountains as possible. Bill continued working at SAR for another month, but I could see the experience was wearing him down. He had seen his father, or what his father had become, and that knowledge was slowly destroying him. As for me, I tried to carry on with my duties, but everything had changed. I could feel the mountain watching me, calling me. Every time I went on patrol, I found myself unconsciously heading toward the place where the tracks were, drawn by an irresistible pull. I began to find other tracks, other signs, other stations hidden throughout the park. Each one tracked a different anomaly, a different point where our world had come into contact with something else. Near Flat Top Mountain, I found Station 3, built to observe what the files called a temporal loop zone, an area where the same day repeated endlessly within a small area. Station 9 at Mills Lake tracked what they called biological impossibilities, organisms that shouldn't exist but do. Station 11 near Long's Peak monitored gravitational anomalies, showing the mountain's mass was variable, sometimes as heavy as it should be, sometimes carrying no weight at all, sometimes possessing negative mass that pushed instead of pulled. But it was Station 1 that blew me away. Hidden so close to civilization, near the park's center, with thousands of tourists passing just a few meters away every day, Station 1 was the command center. And there, still operational after all these years, I found the truth. The 12 stations weren't just monitoring anomalies. All 12 stations were working together to contain something that had been here long before humanity arrived, something the indigenous people knew and feared, something the government discovered in 1915 and built a national park around to keep secret. The files called it the entity. Not exactly an entity, but rather a kind of consciousness existing in higher dimensions, yet anchored to our reality at these 12 points within Rocky Mountain National Park. The stations were designed to contain it, to prevent it from fully manifesting in our dimension. But they were failing. They had been failing since the first breach occurred at Station 7 in 1973. The files emphasized that the entity was not malicious. It was simply incompatible with human consciousness as it currently existed. Exposure to it caused evolutionary acceleration. People transformed into something capable of perceiving and interacting with higher dimensions. The 12 Rangers from 1973 hadn't died. They had evolved. And now the Davis family had joined them. But what scared me was this. According to the files, the entity's confinement was deliberate but temporary. It was being held until humanity was ready, until we had evolved naturally enough to withstand the transformation without losing ourselves completely. And based on the estimates I found, that time was approaching. Estimates varied, but they all converged on the same time frame, between 2040 and 2050. 20 to 30 years from now, the stations would be deliberately disabled, the entity would be released, and humanity would face a choice: evolve or become obsolete. I photographed everything I could, downloaded the files to encrypted drives, gathered evidence that this was real. But when I tried to leave Station 1, I saw Thomas Bryant waiting for me. Not the transformed Bryant from Station 7, but another version of him, younger, wearing a modern Park Services uniform. "Hello, Ranger Walsh," he said with a sad smile. "I was expecting you." "We need to talk about the future." "You're not Bryant," I said, my hand reaching for my gun. "I'm not the Bryant you met, no. I'm from a different timeline, a timeline where I made a different choice in 1973. I've been stationed here ever since, helping maintain control, preparing for the day control breaks down. And now you must make the same choice I did." He explained that those who discovered the truth about Rocky Mountain National Park were offered 3 options. First, their memories could be altered, their experience erased, and they could return to their normal lives without ever knowing what they had seen. The second was to join the containment team and spend their lives protecting the stations and managing the growing number of people who learned the truth. Or the third was to evolve, join the transformed, and help prepare humanity for what was to come. Which did you choose? I asked. The second option, of course. Someone has to stand guard. Someone has to protect the barriers for as long as possible, giving humanity every chance to prepare naturally. It's a lonely, thankless job, and officially we don't exist. But it's necessary. What if I reject all three? His face darkened. That's not an option, Ranger Walsh. You've seen too much, you know too much. The knowledge you possess could cause panic. Put the stations at risk. Dangerously accelerate the timeline. You must choose. I thought of Tyler, his memory likely already erased. I thought of Bill struggling with the pain of knowing what his father had become. I thought of the Davis, transformed into something beyond human comprehension. And I thought of the mountain, patient and eternal, waiting for humanity to be ready for the next step in our evolution. How long do I have to decide? Until sunrise, Bryant said. The team is already in position. Whatever you choose, it will happen at dawn. I spent that night on the roof of Station 1, watching the stars above Rocky Mountain National Park. But now I could see more than just the stars. I could see the faint points glowing with energy from another world. I could see those who had transformed, those who existed in the gaps between gaps, those preparing for humanity's final evolution. I could see its vast and patient presence, its presence pressing against the barriers of our dimension like water crashing against a dam. As dawn approached, Bryant returned. Have you made your decision? I had, but before I tell you what I chose, you need to understand something. This video, this story, exists because of the choice I made. The fact that you are watching it, that you now know the truth, is part of a larger plan, because the restriction is failing faster than anticipated. The entity is growing stronger, and humanity must know, must prepare, must understand that Rocky Mountain National Park protects more than just the wilderness. It protects the future of human consciousness. I chose the second option. I became part of the containment team, the secret organization that protects the stations and controls the truth. But with one change. I insisted on the right to document everything, to slowly reveal the truth, to prepare people for what is to come. They accepted, conditionally. This video is the first part of that agreement. But what you really need to know is why I'm telling you this story now. Last month, Station 7 became active again. The non-existent trace reappeared, and this time it's not disappearing. It's now permanent and waiting for those ready to find it. The Davis family weren't the last people to undergo the transformation. Since 2019, 17 more people have found the trace and chosen to evolve. And Bryant, not the person I met, but the original one who underwent the transformation in 1973, sent a message by overcoming dimensional barriers. A warning and a promise. The countdown has begun. The stations will not shut down simultaneously, but one after another. Station 7 was the first to shut down. Station 4 is next. Each shutdown will reveal its presence more and create more opportunities for transformation. Those who are ready will evolve. Those who aren't, pray you have time to be ready. So, if you're watching this from Rocky Mountain National Park, if you've felt the mountains calling you, if you've found trails not on the maps, you might be one of the ready ones. You may be one of those created to bridge the gap between humanity's current state and its future. The trail exists for those created to find it. But be warned, when you step onto that trail, when you enter the stations, when you encounter the presence, you undergo an irreversible transformation. You either evolve, or you are subdued, or your memory is erased. There is no fourth option. The mountain is patient, but it does not wait forever. The transformation of human consciousness has begun, and Rocky Mountain National Park is its starting point. The question is not whether you will be affected, but when you will be affected, and whether you will be ready when your time comes. This happened a month ago, and since then I've been living a double life. During the day, I'm still Ranger Jennifer Walsh, managing tourist programs, dealing with trail maintenance, and filling out my daily routine reports. But when night falls, I'm part of something completely different. A shadow structure within the Park Service that has existed since 1915 and has the impossible task of protecting humanity from its own evolutionary future. This quarantine unit has a name, though we rarely use it. Project Skyline. Its name comes not from the silhouette of the mountains, but from the boundary between Earth and the sky, between our dimension and other dimensions, a boundary we strive to protect relentlessly and hopelessly. There are currently 47 of us active. We are spread across 12 stations, and each of us has learned the truth and dedicated ourselves to protecting it. I learned so much last month that the 17 long years I spent as a park ranger feel like a child's understanding of the park. The officially 355-mile-long trails. These were carefully designed to keep people away from sensitive areas. The backcountry permit system. Actually, it's a tracking program designed to monitor who goes where and ensure they don't enter restricted areas. The definition of wilderness. A perfect cover to restrict access to areas where dimensional barriers are weakest. But what keeps me awake at night is this. I'm examining the historical records at Station 1, not the censored versions available to the public, but the real records. And I found something that changes everything. The original Thomas Bryant in 1973 didn't just get past the first breach. He was chosen by the entity chosen as an interdimensional messenger, and he left messages, traces, clues for those who came after. In the files, I found his diary, or rather diaries, multiple versions from different timelines, each slightly different but all telling the same basic story. According to Bryant's journals, the entity is not an alien. It is us, humanity from a distant future, evolved beyond physical form, existing in higher dimensions, reaching back in time to secure its own existence. The transformation is not an invasion or an infection. It is our future selves guiding our evolution, ensuring we develop in the right direction to eventually become them. The 12 points in Rocky Mountain National Park are not random. They correspond to 12 specific major milestones in human evolution, 12 important turning points where our species made leaps in consciousness. The 7th station, breached in 1973, represents the 7th leap, the transition from purely physical existence to dimensional awareness. We are currently experiencing this transition, which is why more and more people are finding secret paths, feeling the mountain's call, and becoming ready for transformation. But here's the scary part. Bryant's journals indicate that not all of humanity will make this transition. Evolution never encompasses everyone. Just as not all apes become humans, not all humans will become whatever we are becoming. Those who fail to make the transition, who cannot adapt to dimensional consciousness, will be left behind in a reality that becomes increasingly unstable as dimensional boundaries dissolve. Park Service knows this, the government knows this. That's why Project Skyline exists, not to stop evolution, but to manage it, to maximize the number of humans who can successfully undergo the transformation, and to maintain stability for those who cannot. This is a species-level prioritization. Last week, I was tasked with documenting the current status of all 12 stations. What I found was both frightening and exciting. As I mentioned, Station 7 has been permanently compromised. The trace is now constantly present, and transformation events occur weekly. The 4th station, located near Bear Lake, is showing signs that it will soon fail. The conservation areas are fluctuating, and we have had to close several public trails under the pretext of wildlife management. Station 11 at Long's Peak is somehow amplifying the restriction. The anomaly there, the impossibility of gravity, appears to be balancing rather than destabilizing reality. We suspect this could be a safety measure, a backup system, in case the transformation occurs too rapidly. However, Station 9 at Mills Lake is truly concerning. The biological impossibilities observed there are not just organisms that shouldn't exist. These are organisms that cannot exist within our current dimensional framework. They are things that require 12-dimensional space to fully manifest and are trying to enter our 3-dimensional world. If Station 9 fails before humanity is ready, the consequences could be catastrophic. I was assigned as Station 9's Chief Liaison Officer, which means I spend most of my nights there, monitoring the containment, adjusting the field generators, and documenting any changes. During one of these night shifts, I met someone who would change my perspective on everything once again. Her name was Dr. Kate Vance, and officially, she didn't exist. She had no records, no ID, no history prior to 1973. She appeared at Station 9 one night, passing through the containment areas as if she didn't belong there, wearing clothes that seemed to belong to different eras, sometimes the 1970s, sometimes the 2020s, sometimes styles I didn't recognize. "You're Jennifer Walsh," he said, without asking any questions. "Brian said you'd be here. We need to talk about the acceleration." "Who are you?" I asked, reaching for my gun, though I knew it would be useless. "I was part of the original team at Station 9 in 1974, he said. But that was impossible because he looked about 35. But when you're partially transformed, time works differently. I exist in multiple timelines simultaneously. In some, I age, in others I don't. It's complicated." He explained that the failures weren't random. They were deliberately triggered by someone or something. The entity wasn't just passively waiting, it was actively working to accelerate the timeline, forcing humanity's evolution before it was ready. "But why?" I asked. "Because something else is coming," he said, a serious expression on his face, something completely outside our cluster of dimensions. The entity is trying to evolve us fast enough to face it. We no longer have time for the slow, controlled transformation we planned. He showed me data he had gathered from multiple timelines, the convergent points where all possible futures led to the same conclusion. Humanity had less than 5 years before this external threat arrived. If we hadn't evolved by then, we would be defenseless against entities existing in dimensions we couldn't perceive, let alone fight, entities whose very existence we couldn't even detect. So, the station malfunctions, necessary. Each malfunction allows more people to transform, creating more bridges between dimensions. Yes, some will be lost in the process, unable to handle the transformation. But without this, we will all die. Every timeline, every possibility, will result in extinction if we don't evolve. This changed everything. Project Skyline wasn't just managing evolution. We were racing against a time we didn't even know existed, and we were losing. Dr. Vance gave me a device, like a compass but showing the dimensional north instead of the magnetic north. "This will help you find the others," he said. "Those who are ready but not yet aware of it. Those who only need a small push to begin their transformation. Your mission is no longer just to protect the stations. It's to recruit as many people as possible, prepare them, and help them get ready for what's coming." Before he left, before he vanished into the mist-like containment field, he said something that stuck with me. "Bryant is gathering the transformed ones. They're planning something at the 7th station," Something big, the biggest breach yet. If you want to understand what's really going on, you have to find him. Not the young Bryant you met, but the real Bryant. He's been waiting 46 years to tell someone the whole truth. That's why I'm going there. To Station 7, to return to the non-existent traces and find Thomas Bryant and learn what really happened in 1973, what truly started this evolutionary change, what they know about the threat from outside, and what we must do to save not just humanity, but consciousness itself. If you're watching this, if you've watched all 4 episodes of this story, you're probably one of the prepared. You probably feel the call, sense that reality isn't what you thought it was. This isn't paranoia or imagination. Evolution is knocking at your door. Pay attention to your dreams. Look for patterns in coincidences. Notice that the technology around you is malfunctioning, that compasses are spinning, that things you see disappear when you look directly at them, appearing instead at the edge of your field of vision. These are all signs that you are beginning to perceive beyond the 3 dimensions. And if you find yourself in Rocky Mountain National Park and discover a trail marked by strange dark stones with metallic veins that aren't on any maps, know that you found one of the doors. The decision to enter or not is yours, but once you do, understand that you will become part of something greater than yourself, greater than humanity as we currently understand it. The transformation has begun. The stations are failing. The entity is emerging, and our time is running out. In my next video, I'll tell you about what I found at Station 7, my meeting with the original Thomas Bryant, and the truth he's been waiting 46 years to reveal. This truth will make everything I've told you so far seem like the shallow part of an infinite ocean. But I warn you now, Bryant's story, the true story of what happened in 1973, will challenge everything you thought you knew about reality, consciousness, and humanity's place in the universe. This is the story of the 12 Guardians, who did not disappear but were the first architects of humanity's future. This is about a choice made in a moment of crisis that set us on an irreversible path. And this story is about the 4th station, planned for the next failure, where something Bryant calls the shepherd has begun to stir, guiding species through evolutionary transitions and waiting at Bear Lake for humanity to be ready for its guidance. The mountain calls, paths emerge, transformation accelerates, and somewhere in Rocky Mountain National Park, at an unofficial station, a man who should have died in 1973 prepares to reshape reality. Welcome to Project Skyline. Welcome to evolution. Welcome to the truth about Rocky Mountain National Park. Continues at the ranger station no one talks about.